Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked away from the repair bay. His cargo ship, the Wanderer, sat broken and useless behind him. The mechanic had given him bad news. The engine would take at least 5 days to fix, maybe. More. 5 days stuck on Nexus Prime, the biggest trade station in this part of Space Dot. He pulled out his credit pad and checked his balance. Not much left after paying for the repairs. He would have to find cheap food and maybe sleep in the ship if the docking fees got too high. Being a cargo runner was not easy work, and breakdowns like this could ruin a man. The station buzzed with activity around him. Aliens of every shape and size walked through the wide corridors. Tall, thin beings with blue skin carried glowing boxes. Short, furry creatures rolled past on wheels instead of legs. Flying things with rainbow wings darted overhead, carrying messages between the shops. Jake had been to many stations, but Nexus Prime was special. It was neutral ground where all species could trade safely. The rules were simple here. No fighting, no stealing, and respect for all beings. It worked, mostly. His stomach growled. He needed food, but the main restaurants charged too much. He remembered seeing cheaper places in the entertainment district. Maybe he could find something there. The entertainment district was louder and more colorful than the business areas. Neon signs flashed in dozens of alien languages. Street vendors sold strange foods that smelled interesting. Music drifted from open doorways where different species gathered to socialize. Jake walked slowly, looking for a cheap meal. That was when he heard it, a violin. The sound was clear and beautiful, cutting through all the noise around it. He had not heard human music in months. He followed the sound down a side street. A small crowd had gathered in a circle. Jake pushed through gently, curious to see what was happening. In the center stood a young human woman with long brown hair. She held a violin under her chin and played with her eyes closed. Next to her sat a baby carrier. Inside was a tiny human child, maybe 1-year-old. The baby had big brown eyes and wore a pink dress. She clapped her small hands and made happy sounds as her mother played. The music was sad and beautiful at the same time. Jake recognized the melody. It was an old Earth song called My Heart Will Go On. The woman played it with such feeling that it made his chest tight with emotion. Around the circle, alien beings stood completely still. Their attention was locked on the performance. Jake had never seen anything like it. Aliens rarely showed interest in human culture. Most species kept to themselves, but here they were, watching and listening. A tall, crystal-like being from Zephyr stood next to a huge muscle warrior from the Karate worlds. Near them, several floating creatures that looked like jellyfish hovered in the air. They were ethereals, beings that usually avoided crowds. The baby girl started babbling along with the music. Her sounds did not match the melody, but somehow they fit perfectly. Several aliens made soft noises that might have been their version of awe. The woman opened her eyes as she finished the song. She looked tired but smiled when she saw the crowd. "Thank you for listening," she said softly. Her voice carried a slight accent from one of the outer colonies. A few beings dropped coins into an open violin case at her feet. Others just nodded and walked away. The crowd began to break up, but Jake noticed many of them looked back as they left. The woman carefully put her violin away and picked up the baby. The little girl reached for her mother's face and giggled. It was such a normal, human moment, but somehow it felt special in this alien place. Jake stepped forward. "That was beautiful," he said. The woman looked up, surprised to hear English. "Oh, thank you. I did not expect to meet another human here. I am Jake Morrison. My ship is being repaired, so I'm stuck here for a few days." "I am Katie Sullivan," she said, adjusting the baby on her hip. "This is my daughter, Emma." Emma looked at Jake with curious eyes and reached toward him. He smiled and waved at her. She laughed and hid her face against her mother's shoulder. "How long have you been performing here?" Jake asked. 3 weeks, Katie said. "We are trying to earn passage to the Centauri colonies." My husband is stationed there with the Colonial Defense Force, Jake understood. Military families were often separated for long periods. It was hard on everyone, especially with a baby. The aliens seem to really like your music, he said. Katie looked around at the few beings still lingering nearby. I was surprised too. On other stations, they usually ignore human performers. But here, they come back day after day. Some of them bring friends. A small green alien with 4 arms approached them. It made clicking sounds and pointed at Emma. The baby giggled and clapped her hands. I think it likes her, Katie said. Alien made more clicking sounds and dropped several coins into the violin case. It waved at Emma, who waved back. Then it walked away, still making happy clicking noises. That happens a lot, Katie explained. They seem fascinated by Emma. I think it is because she is so young and innocent. She treats everyone the same, whether they are human or alien. Jake watched more beings walk past. Many of them glanced at Katie and Emma with what looked like curiosity or even fondness. Have you noticed anything else unusual? He asked. Katie thought for a moment. Well, yesterday a group of Karathi warriors stood here for almost an hour. They never moved or made a sound. When I finished playing, one of them had water running down his face. I did not know they could cry. That was strange. Karathi were known as fierce fighters who showed no emotion. Jake had never heard of one crying. And this morning, Katie continued, some ethereals floated down from the upper levels. They usually stay in the meditation areas, but they came here and listened to 3 whole songs. Emma started to fuss, and Katie bounced her gently. She is getting hungry. We should go back to our room. Where are you staying? Jake asked. The budget quarters in Section C. It is not much, but it is clean and safe. Jake nodded. Those were the cheapest rooms on the station. Katie was clearly struggling to make ends meet. Will you be here tomorrow? He asked. Every day at the same time. We need every credit we can earn. I will try to come by and listen again. Your music is really something special. Katie smiled. Thank you, Jake. It was nice meeting you. As they walked away, Emma looked back over her mother's shoulder and waved at Jake. He waved back, smiling. But as he watched them disappear into the crowd, Jake could not shake the feeling that something important was happening here. The way the aliens had reacted to Katie's music and Emma's presence was unlike anything he had ever seen. He looked back at the spot where they had performed. A few aliens were still standing there, as if hoping the music would start again. Something was definitely happening on Nexus Prime, and Jake had a feeling it was bigger than anyone realized. Jake woke up the next morning to the sound of his communication device beeping. A message waited for him from the repair shop. The parts for his ship would arrive later than expected. You will be stuck on Nexus Prime for at least a week, maybe. Longer. He groaned and rolled out of his narrow bunk. The ship felt empty and quiet without the engine running. Through the small window, he could see the busy docking bay where aliens loaded and unloaded cargo from dozens of different vessels. After a quick breakfast of ration bars and synthetic coffee, Jake decided to explore more of the station. He had time to kill, and yesterday's encounter with Katie and Emma had left him curious about the entertainment district. As he walked through the corridors, he noticed something odd. Small groups of aliens were moving in the same direction he was heading. They walked with purpose, like they had somewhere important to be. Jake followed them into the entertainment district. The crowds were much larger than yesterday. Beings of all shapes and sizes filled the streets. They seemed to be gathering near the spot where Katie had performed. He checked his watch. It was still 2 hours before Katie usually started playing, but aliens were already claiming spots in what would become the audience circle. Some had brought small stools or cushions to sit on. Others simply stood and waited. This is very strange, said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a tall, pale being with large black eyes. It wore the dark robes of a Vorthic diplomat. A small translation device hung around its neck. I am Zex Caller of the Cultural Compliance Division, the being said. I have been monitoring this situation for the past 3 days. Situation? Jake asked. The unusual gathering of multiple species in this location. It is highly irregular. Most species prefer to socialize only with their own kind, especially in entertainment settings. Jake looked around at the growing crowd. Zex Caller was right. He could see at least 15 different species, all waiting peacefully together. On most stations, different groups would claim separate areas. Have you seen the human performance? Jake asked. I have observed it twice. The female produces sound vibrations with a stringed instrument. The juvenile makes primitive vocalizations. Nothing that should cause this level of interspecies interest. But Jake could see that Zex Caller was troubled. The alien's large eyes kept scanning the crowd with obvious concern. Are they breaking any rules? Jake asked. No direct violations have occurred. However, the Cultural Compliance Division exists to maintain proper boundaries between species. This gathering threatens the established social order. A group of Karathi warriors walked past them. Each one was over 7 feet tall with thick gray skin and tusks. They usually traveled in military formations, but today they moved more casually. One of them even carried what looked like a gift wrapped in colorful paper. Most concerning. Zex Caller muttered. Jake left the worried diplomat and moved closer to the performance area. The crowd was bigger than he had expected. At least 200 beings filled the street. Vendors had set up small stands selling food and drinks. It was starting to look like a festival. He found a spot near the back and waited. Around him, aliens chatted quietly in their own languages. The atmosphere felt friendly and relaxed. Very different from the usual tension between species on most stations. At exactly the same time as yesterday, Katie appeared with Emma in her carrier. The crowd immediately went quiet. Even the street vendors stopped calling out their wares. Katie looked surprised by the size of the audience. She set down her violin case and looked around at all the faces watching her. For a moment she seemed nervous. Emma started babbling and reaching toward the crowd. Several aliens made soft sounds in response. The baby's innocent friendliness seemed to calm her mother. Katie lifted her violin and began to play. Today's song was different from yesterday. It was slower and more peaceful. Jake recognized it as an old lullaby his own mother used to sing. The effect on the crowd was immediate. Beings who had been chatting fell silent. Those who were standing sat down. Even the floating ethereals descended closer to the ground. Emma clapped along with the music, her tiny hands keeping a rhythm that was almost right. When she made her happy babbling sounds, several aliens in the front row leaned forward to listen. More closely, Jake noticed something he had missed yesterday. Many of the aliens were recording the performance on their personal devices. The music and images of Emma will be shared across the communication networks. As Katie played, Jake saw more beings arriving. Word was spreading through the station. Some aliens had clearly traveled from the upper levels where the expensive hotels and restaurants were located. Others came from the industrial sections where the workers lived. A group of Zephyrian merchants stood near the edge of the crowd. Their crystal bodies caught the light and sparkled as they swayed slightly to the music. Jake had never seen Zephyrians show any interest in art or entertainment before. When Katie finished the lullaby, the crowd stayed silent for several long seconds. Then applause started. It began with a few beings clapping their hands, tentacles, or whatever they used for appreciation. Soon the entire crowd was making noise in approval. Emma laughed and clapped too, delighted by all the attention. She pointed at different aliens and made excited sounds. When she pointed at a massive Karathi warrior, the huge being actually waved. Back at her. Katie started another song. This one was more upbeat and cheerful. Emma bounced in her carrier and tried to sing along. Her baby sounds mixed with the violin music in a way that made many in the crowd seem to smile. Jake noticed movement at the edge of the crowd. More aliens were arriving every minute. Some pushed forward to get better views. Others were content. to listen from a distance. Near the front, a small group of ethereals had formed a circle. They floated just above the ground, their translucent bodies glowing softly. Jake had read that ethereals experience music differently than other species. They could actually see sound as colors and shapes. As Katie played, the ethereals began to change colors. Their usual pale blues shifted to warm yellows and soft pinks. It was beautiful to watch. When the song ended, coins and small gifts rained into Katie's violin case. But Jake noticed that many beings were not just dropping money. They were leaving small tokens and trinkets from their home worlds. A wanderer. Nomad placed a carved stone next to the case. A Karafi warrior left a small metal sculpture. Even some of the Zephyrian merchants contributed crystals that glowed with inner light. Katie looked overwhelmed by the generosity. She picked up Emma and turned to face the crowd. "Thank you all so much," she said. Her voice carried clearly in the quiet street. "Emma and I are grateful for your kindness." Emma waved at the crowd and made happy sounds. The response was immediate. Beings of all species waved back, made friendly noises, or showed appreciation in their own ways. But Jake noticed that not everyone was happy about the gathering. At the edge of the crowd, he could see Zex Cowler talking urgently into a communication device. The Vorthic diplomat looked more worried than before. As the crowd began to break up, Jake heard fragments of conversations in different languages. His translation device picked up bits and pieces. "Such beautiful sounds," said one alien. "The small human brings joy," said another. "We should bring our younglings tomorrow," suggested a third. Jake realized that this was no longer just a street performance. It was becoming something bigger. Word was spreading beyond the station. He had heard that recordings of Katie's music were being shared on the galactic communication networks. As he walked back to his ship, Jake felt both excited and worried. Katie's simple performances were bringing different species together in ways he had never seen before. But he also knew that not everyone would be happy about this change. Change made some beings nervous, and nervous beings sometimes did dangerous things. He made a mental note to come back tomorrow. Something told him that the real story was just beginning. Jake arrived at the performance area early the next day. He wanted to see how big the crowd would grow. Already, nearly 300 beings filled the street. Some had been waiting for hours. He noticed something new. Families had started coming. Adult aliens brought their young ones to see Katie and Emma perform. The little alien children seemed especially fascinated by the human baby. As Jake found a spot to watch, a woman approached him. She was human, with short black hair and glasses. She carried a datapad and looked like a scientist. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you here for the performance?" "Yes," Jake replied. "I have been watching for 3 days now. It is quite something." "I am Dr. Lisa Chun," she said, extending her hand. "I study alien psychology aboard the research station that docks here. This situation is remarkable from a scientific viewpoint." Jake shook her hand. "Jake Morrison. I run cargo between systems. What makes this so special from your perspective?" "Doctor." Chum pulled out her datapad and showed him charts and graphs. "I have been measuring the responses of different species to the music. The results are unlike anything I have seen before." She pointed to a chart showing brainwave patterns. "These are Zephyrian neural readings during yesterday's performance. See how their crystal matrices resonate with the violin frequencies. They are experiencing something like what humans call nostalgia." Jake looked at the complex data. "I do not understand most of this, but it sounds important." "It is extremely important," Dr. Chun said excitedly. "Music affects each species differently because of how their brains work. But Katie's playing somehow creates responses that cross those barriers." She showed him another chart. "Look at this. Karafi emotional centers activate in ways we have never recorded before. They are feeling things they do not have words for in their language." "What about the baby?" Jake asked. "Emma seems to be just as important as the music." Dr. Chun nodded enthusiastically. That is the most fascinating part. Human infants display pure emotion without any learned social barriers. When Emma reacts to the music with joy, the aliens see genuine feeling without pretense. She pulled up a video recording on her datapad. It showed Emma clapping and laughing during yesterday's performance. Watch the aliens in the background. See how they focus on her reactions. She is teaching them about human emotions in real time. Jake watched the recording. He could see alien faces change as they observed Emma's innocent responses to the music. It was like they were learning a new language through watching her. The ethereals are especially affected, Dr. Chung continued. Their species communicates through pure emotion rather than words. They tell me they can hear human feelings in ways they never experienced before. A commotion near the performance area interrupted their conversation. The crowd was parting to let someone through. Jake saw a group of tall, elegant beings moving toward the center. They had pale skin that seemed to glow slightly and wore flowing robes. Ethereals, Dr. Chung whispered. More than I have ever seen in one place. The ethereals floated just above the ground, their bodies becoming more translucent as they moved. They arranged themselves in a semicircle near where Katie would perform. Other aliens respectfully gave them space. Katie arrived with Emma, right on schedule. She looked amazed by the size of the crowd. Jake estimated at least 400 beings now filled the street. More were arriving every minute, but when Katie saw the ethereals, she hesitated. Everyone knew that ethereals were the most advanced species in the galaxy. They rarely interacted with other beings, especially humans. Emma had no such concerns. She pointed at the glowing ethereals and made excited baby sounds. One of the ethereals drifted closer and extended a long, thin finger toward her. Emma reached out and almost touched it before Katie gently pulled her back. The ethereal made a sound like wind chimes. Other ethereals responded with similar musical tones. Dr. Chung grabbed Jake's arm. They're communicating, she said. In their pure emotional language. They are saying something about young harmony and innocent song. Katie seemed to understand that something important was happening. She carefully set up her violin and looked around at the massive crowd. Everyone was completely silent, waiting. She began to play a song Jake had not heard before. It was complex and beautiful, full of rising and falling notes that seemed to tell a story without words. Emma listened with wide eyes, occasionally clapping when the music became happy. The effect on the crowd was immediate and powerful. Jake watched in amazement as beings throughout the audience began to show emotion. Korafi warriors had tears running down their faces. Zephyrian crystals pulsed with inner light. Even the usually expressionless Vortec diplomats swayed slightly to the rhythm, but the ethereals showed the strongest response. Their bodies began changing colors and patterns that matched the music. Blues and greens flowed across their forms. During sad passages, warm golds and reds appeared during joyful sections. Dr. Chun was frantically taking notes on her datapad. Incredible, she whispered. The ethereals are translating the music into their emotional language. They are experiencing human feelings directly. As Katie played, Emma began making her usual happy sounds. But today something different happened. The ethereals started responding to her with their own musical tones. Soon a conversation developed. Between the baby and the advanced beings, Emma would babble and the ethereals would respond with chimes. She would laugh and they would create harmonious sounds that seemed to match her joy. The violin music provided a background for this impossible communication between a human baby and the galaxy's most evolved species. Other aliens in the crowd began to join in. Korafi warriors started humming in their deep voices. Zephyrians created ringing sounds with their crystal bodies. Wanderer nomads added rhythmic clapping. What had started as a simple violin performance was becoming a massive interspecies musical collaboration. Katie kept playing, but now she was just one part of a much larger symphony. Jake felt tears in his own eyes as he watched hundreds of different beings create music together. Species that normally never interacted were harmonizing with each other. All because of one human woman and her baby daughter, Dr. Chun, had stopped taking notes. She was just staring in wonder at the scene before them. "This changes everything," she said softly. "Every assumption we have made about interspecies relations, about communication, about what is possible between different forms of life." The improvised concert continued for almost an hour. Different aliens took turns adding their voices or sounds to the mix. Emma clapped and laughed throughout, delighting in the musical chaos she had helped create. When Katie finally stopped playing, the crowd did not disperse immediately. Beings from different species stayed to talk with each other. Jake saw Karathi warriors showing Zephyrian merchants how to create their humming sounds. Ethereals floated among different groups, sharing their emotional music, but not everyone was happy about what was happening. Jake spotted Zexcaler at the edge of the crowd, talking urgently to other official-looking beings. The Vorthic diplomat looked more worried than ever as the crowd finally began to break up. One of the ethereals approached Katie. It created a complex series of musical tones that Dr. Chun translated. "It's thanking her," Dr. Chun said. "It says she has opened a door between species that has been closed for thousands of years." Katie smiled and bowed respectfully to the ethereal. Emma waved her tiny hand, and the being responded with gentle chimes before floating away. But as Jake watched the last of the crowd disperse, he noticed ships arriving at the station's docking bays. Military vessels from different species were requesting permission to dock. Word about the performances was spreading beyond Nexus Prime. Some beings were coming to witness the miracle of interspecies harmony. Others might be coming to stop it. Jake woke up to the sound of military ships docking at the station. Through his small window, he could see dark vessels with angular designs. They were hegemony ships, and they meant trouble. The hegemony was an alliance of species that believed in strict separation between different alien races. They maintained order through military force and harsh rules. Jake had heard stories about worlds where the hegemony had taken control. Free mixing between species was forbidden there. He dressed quickly and headed for the entertainment district. If the hegemony was here, Katie and Emma might be in danger. The performances had become too big, too noticeable. Someone with power had decided they needed to stop. The streets were busier than usual, but Jake noticed a different feeling in the air. Aliens moved in smaller groups and spoke in whispers. Many kept looking over their shoulders as if they expected trouble. Near the performance area, Jake saw something that made his stomach drop. Hegemony soldiers in black armor were setting up barriers around the street. They carried weapons and moved with military precision. Dr. Chun appeared beside him, looking worried. "They arrived 2 hours ago," she said. "Commander Vexteran himself is leading them." Jake knew that name. Commander Vexteran was famous throughout the galaxy for crushing what the hegemony called cultural contamination. He had shut down dozens of interspecies gatherings on other worlds. "What do they want?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "They have orders to arrest Katie and Emma for violating cultural separation laws. They say the performances are causing dangerous mixing between species." Jake looked around at the growing crowd of aliens waiting for the daily concert. Many of them looked nervous, but none were leaving. If anything, more beings were arriving than usual. Do they know what will happen if they try to arrest a human? Mother and her baby in front of all these witnesses? Jake asked. Dr. Chun shook her head. "I do not think they care. The hegemony believes that maintaining order is more important than individual rights." A new group of beings pushed through the crowd. Jake recognized them as representatives from the Galactic Council, the loose government that tried to maintain peace between species. They wore the white robes of diplomatic immunity. "At least someone is trying to keep this peaceful," Dr. Chun said. But Jake was not so sure. The Galactic Council was weak compared to the hegemony's military might. If Commander Vexteran had decided to make arrests, a few diplomats might not be enough to stop him. The crowd continued to grow despite the obvious tension. Jake estimated over 600 beings now filled the street. Korathi warriors stood, in groups, their hands near their weapons. Zephyrian merchants had formed protective circles around their families. Even the peaceful ethereals had descended from their usual high positions to float closer to the ground dot at the scheduled time. Katie appeared with Emma. She saw the hegemony soldiers immediately and stopped walking. Her face went pale with fear. Emma, sensing her mother's distress, started to cry. The sound of the baby's tears seemed to affect the entire crowd. A low murmur of anger spread through the assembled aliens. Jake pushed forward through the crowd. He had to reach Katie before the soldiers did. But as he moved, he noticed something remarkable happening around him. Aliens were linking arms. Korathi warriors put their massive hands on the shoulders of small wanderer nomads. Zephyrian crystals touched the fur of various creature species. Ethereals extended their glowing forms to connect with beings below them. A protective circle was forming around Katie and Emma. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of species were joining together to shield the human mother and her. Baby Commander Vex Terran stepped forward from behind the barriers. He was tall and imposing, with the scarred face of a veteran soldier. His voice carried clearly across the crowd through amplification devices. By order of the Hegemony Alliance, you are all participating in illegal cultural mixing. Disperse immediately or face arrest. The crowd did not move. If anything, they pressed closer together. Katie stood in the center of the protective ring, holding Emma close. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with wide, curious eyes. She seemed to sense that something important was happening. I am Commander Vex Terran of the Hegemony Fleet, the officer continued. We have evidence that this human's activities are creating dangerous unity between species. This threatens the established order that has maintained peace for centuries. Jake finally reached the inner circle. He found himself standing next to a massive Korathi warrior who nodded at him respectfully. On his other side, a group of ethereals floated just above the ground, their bodies glowing with determination. We are not here to hurt anyone, Commander, Vex Terran said. We simply need to remove the source of this cultural contamination. At the word contamination, an angry sound rose from the crowd. Beings of all species began making noises of protest. They had been called contaminated for simply enjoying music together. Katie stepped forward slightly. Emma was calm in her arms, looking around at all the faces surrounding them. The baby seemed to understand that these beings were trying to protect her. I am just a mother trying to earn money for my family, Katie said, her voice shaking but clear. I never meant to cause any trouble. Your intentions do not matter, Commander Vex Terran replied. The result is the same. You have created unauthorized unity between species. This cannot be allowed to continue. Emma made a small sound and reached toward the crowd. Several aliens in the front row reached back toward her, their faces showing. Concern for the child, Dr. Chun had somehow made it to the inner circle as well. She was recording everything on her datapad. This is historic, she whispered to Jake. I have never seen anything like this level of interspecies cooperation. Commander, Vex Terran gestured to his soldiers. They began moving forward, pushing against the crowd. But the aliens did not give way. If anything, they pressed closer together. Final warning, the commander announced. Clear the area, or we will use force. That was when something unexpected happened. Katie lifted her violin to her chin and began to play. The melody was soft and sad, like a lullaby for a frightened child. Emma immediately calmed and began making her happy sounds along with the music. The crowd grew quiet, listening to the gentle tune, but the music had a strange effect on the hegemony soldiers. Jake watched as several of them stopped advancing. Their weapons lowered slightly as they listened to the violin. Commander Vex Terran noticed his soldiers hesitating. Do not listen to the music, he ordered. It is designed to weaken your resolve, but it was too late. The combination of Katie's playing and Emma's innocent sounds was affecting everyone within hearing distance, even some of the hegemony soldiers. were showing signs of emotion. Jake realized this was the moment that would decide everything. Would the power of music and innocent love be enough to stop military force? Or would Commander Vexteran follow through on his threats? The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath as the confrontation reached its breaking point. In the center of it all, a young mother played violin while her baby daughter clapped along, surrounded by hundreds of beings who had chosen to risk everything to protect them. The next few minutes would change the course of galactic history. Katie's violin music filled the tense air between the hegemony soldiers and the protective crowd. The melody was simple but powerful, like a song a mother might sing to calm a scared child. Emma clapped her tiny hands and made soft babbling sounds that seemed to blend perfectly with the music. Jake watched in amazement as the standoff continued. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of species stood firm against armed soldiers. They had linked arms, tentacles, wings, and whatever limbs they possessed to create an unbreakable chain around. Katie and her baby. Commander Vexteran's face showed growing frustration. His soldiers had stopped advancing when the music started. Some of them were actually lowering their weapons as they listened to the violin and baby sounds. "Ignore the music," the commander shouted at his troops. "It is just noise designed to confuse you. Remember your training." But training could not overcome what the soldiers were feeling. Many of them came from conquered worlds where the hegemony had separated families and banned cultural expression. The sight of a mother protecting her child with only music as her weapon touched something deep inside them. Jake activated his personal communication device and began broadcasting the scene live across the galactic networks. If this was going to be a historic moment, the entire galaxy needed to witness it. Dr. Chun stood beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Look at them," she whispered, pointing at the crowd. "Species that have been enemies for centuries are standing together." She was right. Jake could see ancient rivals side by side in the protective circle. Korathi warriors stood next to Zephyrian merchants, their traditional hatred forgotten. Ethereals floated above former enemies, sharing their glowing presence. With all below them, Emma seemed to sense the importance of the moment. Instead of being frightened by the tension, she reached out toward the soldiers with her small hands. Her innocent gesture made several hegemony troops take a step backward. One young soldier, barely more than a teenager himself, completely lowered his weapon. He stared at Emma with an expression of wonder and pain. Jake realized the soldier probably had family he had not seen in years because of military service. "Private Chunvar," Commander Vexteran barked. "Raise your weapon immediately." The young soldier looked torn between duty and the emotion stirring inside him. The music continued to play, and Emma continued to reach toward him with trusting, baby fingers. "She is just a baby, sir," the soldier said quietly. "She is not dangerous." "She is the center of this contamination," the commander replied harshly. "All of this chaos exists because beings are responding to human emotional manipulation." But as the words left his mouth, something unexpected happened. The crowd began to sing. It started with the Ethereals, who created their beautiful chiming sounds in harmony with Katie's violin. Then the Korathi warriors added their deep, rumbling voices. Zephyrians contributed crystal-clear notes that rang like bells. Soon, hundreds of beings were creating music together. Each species added their own unique sounds to the growing chorus. Katie kept playing violin as the foundation, while Emma clapped and laughed with pure joy. The song had no words, but everyone seemed to understand its meaning. It spoke of unity, hope, and the simple desire to exist peacefully together. It was a song about families separated by war, about children who deserved to grow up in a galaxy where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Jake felt chills run down his spine as the impromptu chorus grew louder and more complex. He had never heard anything so beautiful or powerful in his entire life. More hegemony soldiers began to waver. Their weapons drooped as they listened to the music. Some had tears on their faces as they remembered their own homes and families. Commander Vexteran realized he was losing control of the situation. "Prepare to advance," he ordered. "We will push through the crowd and extract the humans by force." But as his soldiers prepared to move forward, something extraordinary happened. More aliens began arriving at the scene. They came from every part of the station, drawn by the live broadcast Jake had started. Within minutes, the crowd had doubled in size. Over 1,000 beings now filled the street and the surrounding areas. They came from the docking bays, the business districts, even the restricted diplomatic levels. All of them joined the protective circle around Katie, and Emma. Dr. Chun grabbed Jake's arm. "Look at the ships," she said, pointing toward the docking bays visible through the station's transparent walls. More vessels were arriving every minute. Not hegemony ships, but civilian transports from dozens of worlds. Beings throughout the galaxy had seen the broadcast and were traveling to Nexus Prime to witness the standoff. Commander Vexteran saw the new arrivals as well. His military advantage was disappearing as more witnesses gathered. Any action he took now would be seen by representatives from every major species in the galaxy. "Sir," one of his officers approached nervously, "we are receiving communications from multiple governments. They are demanding explanations for our presence here." The commander's jaw tightened. He had expected to make quick arrests and leave before anyone important noticed. Instead, he found himself in the center of galactic attention with thousands of aliens singing together in defiance of his authority. Emma's innocent laughter cut through the music and the tension. She was having the time of her life, surrounded by beings who clearly adored her. She pointed at different aliens and made happy sounds, and they responded with gentle noises of their own. "This is madness," Commander Vexteran muttered. "One human child has turned the galaxy upside down." But Jake could see the truth in the commander's words was exactly backward. Emma had not turned anything upside down. She had shown everyone what the galaxy could be like right side up. A place where beings judged each other by kindness rather than species, where music and laughter mattered more than military power. The singing grew even louder as more voices joined. Jake realized that beings on ships throughout the system were adding their voices through communication devices. The song was spreading beyond the station, beyond the immediate area. Across space itself. Katie continued to play violin, tears now streaming down her own face. She had never intended to start a revolution. She had just wanted to earn money to reunite with her husband. But somehow her simple music had become the center of something much larger. Commander Vexteran faced an impossible choice. He could order his soldiers to attack thousands of peaceful beings, including many diplomatic representatives. Or he could retreat and admit that the hegemony's power had limits. As the music reached its crescendo, with beings throughout the galaxy singing together in harmony, the commander made his decision. The fate of interspecies relations for generations to come will be decided in the next few moments. Commander Vexteran stood frozen as the galaxy-wide song continued around him. Thousands of beings sang together while his soldiers lowered their weapons one by one. The young private named Shenvar had tears streaming down his face as he listened to the music. "Sir," his communication officer approached carefully, "we are receiving direct orders from Hegemony Command. They want us to withdraw immediately." The commander's face darkened. "Withdraw? We have our orders to arrest the humans." "The orders have changed, sir. The galactic media is calling this the Nexus Miracle. Over 50 governments are demanding explanations. If we attack now, it could start a war." Jake continued broadcasting the scene across the galaxy. His viewer count had reached billions. Beings on thousands of worlds were watching the standoff and adding their voices to the song through their communication devices. Commander Vexteran looked around at the massive crowd surrounding Katie and Emma. What had started as a simple arrest had become something impossible to control. The entire galaxy was watching, and history would judge whatever happened next. "All units," he spoke into his communication device, "fall back to the ships. We are withdrawing." A cheer rose from the crowd as the hegemony soldiers began to retreat. But it was not a cheer of victory over an enemy. It was a cheer of relief. That violence had been avoided. The singing continued as the soldiers packed up their equipment and left. Emma clapped, her hands with delight at all the happy sounds around her. She had no idea that her innocent presence had just prevented a galactic crisis. To her, this was simply a wonderful day full of music and friendly faces. As the last hegemony ship departed from the station, representatives from the Galactic Council approached Katie. She was still playing violin, though the formal standoff had ended. The music had become a celebration rather than a protest. "Miss Sullivan," said the lead council representative, a distinguished ethereal whose body glowed with warm colors. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, we want to thank you for your courage today." Katie stopped playing and looked confused. "I was just trying to protect my daughter. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Sometimes the most important moments in history happen by accident," the ethereal replied through its translator. "Your music has shown the galaxy something we had forgotten, that beings of different species can share beauty and emotion together." Dr. Chun pushed through the crowd, still recording everything on her datapad. "The neural response data from today will revolutionize our understanding of interspecies communication," she said excitedly. "We have proof that music can create emotional bridges between any form of life." Jake finished his broadcast and approached Katie as well. "You are famous across the galaxy now," he told her. "Every major news network is carrying the story of the street performer who stopped a military force with a violin." Katie looked overwhelmed. "I just want to get to my husband," she said. "We need the money for transport to the colonies." The ethereal representative made chiming sounds that translated as laughter. "Miss Sullivan, I do not think money will be a problem anymore. The Galactic Council is prepared to offer you something much more valuable than transport fare." Over the next hour, as the crowd slowly dispersed, Katie learned about the Council's offer. They wanted to establish the first interspecies cultural exchange program with Katie as its director. The position came with a substantial salary, housing for her family, and the chance to travel the galaxy sharing music between different worlds. "You will be helping to create permanent connections between species," the ethereal explained, "teaching them to understand each other through art and music instead of politics and war." Emma had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, exhausted by all the excitement. She looked peaceful and content, unaware that she had become the most famous baby in galactic history. Jake watched the negotiations with wonder. A week ago, he had been a simple cargo runner with a broken ship. Now he was witnessing the birth of a new era in interspecies relations. Dr. Chun approached him with her datapad. "The Council wants you as well," she said. "They need someone to document and broadcast these cultural exchanges. Your broadcast today showed beings across the galaxy what was really happening here." "Me?" Jake said, surprised. "I am just a cargo pilot." "You are someone who recognized the importance of what you were seeing," Dr. Chum replied. "That makes you perfect for the job." As the sun set over Nexus Prime, Katie made her decision. She would accept the Council's offer, but with conditions. Her husband would be transferred from military duty to help with the cultural program. They would work together to bring music and understanding to worlds throughout the galaxy. Jake accepted the position as well. His days of running cargo alone through space were over. Now he would travel with Katie and her family, documenting how music could bring different species together. 3 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the new ship provided by the Galactic Council. They were approaching their 5th world on the cultural exchange tour. Each stop had been more successful than the last. Katie was in the ship's concert hall, practicing for their next performance. Emma, now walking and talking in simple words, toddled around the room while her mother played. She had learned to say music in 7 different alien languages. Through the ship's communication system, Jake could hear reports from across the galaxy. Similar cultural exchange programs were starting on dozens of worlds. Street musicians, artists, and performers from all species were traveling between worlds, sharing their cultures with others. The hegemony still existed, but their power had weakened. Too many of their own soldiers had been affected by the music that day on Nexus Prime. Many had requested transfers to peaceful duties, or had simply resigned to pursue other paths. Most importantly, the barriers between species were beginning to break down. Mixed communities were forming on frontier worlds. Interspecies families were becoming more common. Children of different species played together in schools that taught appreciation for all forms of life. Jake thought back to that first day when he had heard Katie's violin in the entertainment district. He had been looking for cheap food and found something much more valuable. He had found proof that the galaxy could be united by something as simple as music and the innocent joy of a human child. Emma ran up to the window and pressed her small hands against the glass. She pointed at the stars and made excited sounds. In her developing mind, those points of light were not foreign and dangerous places. They were simply homes to friends she had not met yet. Katie finished practicing and joined them at the window. "Ready for our next concert?" she asked Jake. He smiled and activated his recording equipment. "Always ready to document history," he replied. As their ship approached the next world, Jake began a new broadcast. "This is Jake Morrison reporting from the Cultural Exchange Ship Harmony. Today we continue the mission that began with a simple street performance. The mission to prove that music, love, and hope are truly universal languages." Behind him, Emma laughed and clapped her hands. That sound, more than any words, told the galaxy everything it needed to know about the future. They were building together,